So we are live, Mike. Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Sporting Myths. I have Mike Hesson with me. The link for his channel is tagged in the introduction of this episode. Mike, thank you so much for joining me. We're going to discuss Pakistan versus New Zealand. You don't need any introduction, but I'll still give it. Mike is the legendary New Zealand coach who steered them into a World Cup final. No other New Zealand coach had done that before. So Mike's experience of New Zealand cricket is there. He's worked in the IPL with RCB for so many years, so he understands Asian conditions really well. He is the head coach of Islamabad United's title-winning side of 2024. So, any questions that you have for Mike, those would be great. Do send in your questions. Mike, thank you for joining me. Initial thoughts on the Pakistan versus New Zealand game?
Oh, look, I didn't. I felt that Pakistan never really fired a shot. In all honesty, I was sort of waiting for. They did a little bit with the ball. I thought Nassim's spell to Daryl Mitchell, sparked a little bit of life with the ball, on a flat surface. But with the bat, I thought New Zealand got above par, but not by a huge amount. Conditions were still good for batting. Sure, there was a little bit of turn, but it was still good for batting. And I just think, Pakistan never really gave himself a chance to chase that total down. Salman Agha was impressive. Kushal Shah was impressive. A few cameos at the back end. And to only lose by 60 without firing a shot, I'd be pretty frustrated as a Pakistani supporter today.
So, Mike, on that note, not firing any shots, why do you think that's the case in international cricket? You've coached so many teams, so many top players, and a player of Babar's quality. Where do you think it went wrong?
Well, obviously Babar was probably the main culprit, but he wasn't alone. Saud Shakil probably batting in an unfamiliar role, 6 off 19, I think. Rizwan 4 off 13, whatever it is. So no one really got underway, and I think it's through fear. I think there is an element of the pressure probably being a little bit too much and not wanting to fail, like desperately wanting to do well. So I certainly don't think it's through a lack of effort or will or desire. I think it's just a lack of actually putting yourself out there a little bit and actually being, not being fearful of failure. I think if you're batting with fear, especially when you're someone like Babar with the skill that he has, and we see it all the time, whether it be for Pakistan or playing in the PSL, some of the shots he has are exquisite. He's expansive. It's just he picks and chooses when to do it. And you've seen some amazing innings, I'm sure. When you're a manager, Rayhan, you would have seen some innings where you've gone, wow, that's the Babar we know we can see.
Absolutely. I think sometimes the frustrating part about him is that you watch him bat and you know how good he is. And then he doesn't, sometimes it doesn't come off. So that's the frustrating part, because anyone who knows how good he is, every player rates him, every cricketer rates him, and he has that class and ability. So that's what makes it even more frustrating. And Mike, you talked about fear of failure. So fear of failure, you worked in Pakistani and Indian cultures. How is it that different from New Zealand? Do New Zealand players not have the same fear of failure, and why is that the case?
Look, I think New Zealanders certainly they do. But I think we were able to change that culture in terms of not having a roundabout selection model. In terms of if you actually have spent the time selecting a player, that player knows that they will get a number of opportunities to show how good they are. And I think often in countries where there is a heck of a lot more depth, that actually can hold you back. Whether it be India or Pakistan, where you've got 1, 2, maybe 3 innings maximum. To make a major contribution. And players are all different. Some players, it takes way longer than that to feel comfortable where you are. So I think in many ways, New Zealand are benefited from the fact through a lack of depth, because they know that they'll get more opportunities. Therefore, they're not playing for their spot every day.
That's true. I was also thinking about the same thing, that it's almost like a conveyor belt in Pakistan. So we don't look after our players. We don't settle them into particular positions. And that's one of the major reasons that players always are looking over their shoulder. They're not secure and maybe don't take as many chances. Also, if, for example, a New Zealand player gets out playing a reverse sweep, no one will say anything to him. They'll just say that's your strength, you backed it. Whereas in Pakistan, if you get out playing an aggressive shot, the feedback normally is, what kind of a shot was that, brain fade moment, and all of that. So you've been in these cultures. How do you address that as a coach?
Well, I think that that, in all honesty, is quite an old school mentality. Like New Zealand has had that in the past as well. I mean, if you think even back further to, and there'll be some older people on here, Mike Gatting getting out reverse sweeping in the World Cup final 1987 or something. So, long time ago. He got absolutely hammered by the media and everyone, to a point where everyone was afraid to play that shot again for years. And
Yeah.
I think in New Zealand, like as long as you know that player has worked on that shot, in all honesty, is it actually better that they get out playing an attacking shot or they get out defending and caught behind? Like, what does it matter if you're actually trying to be? They keep talking about the word intent at the moment. I think that's a bit overused. But if you're actually trying to take on the bowlers and dominate the game with the skill set that you have, if you're going to get out at some stage, so you may as well be looking to score runs. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me that there's better ways of getting out than other ways. It just doesn't make sense to me.
So, Mike, for viewers who are listening into this, I'd like to narrate a story about you from the PSL. And I remember there was a game when Azam Khan got caught at the boundary, and he'd already hit a couple of sixes in that over. And he was a bit disappointed. And he came into the dressing room and he was a bit disappointed. And he said, maybe I should not have played that shot. And I remember what you said to him, which stuck with me to this day. You said to him, that was a great option. You just did not execute it well. Whereas in Pakistan, the culture is, if something like that happens, you go to the batter and you say to him, you had already hit two sixes. What was the need of the third? So that mentality shift, I think that's very clear. And that's why I think you've gotten so much success with your batting teams. Even your 2015 New Zealand team, the way they started off with Baz McCullum at the top. So, playing one day cricket still has, space for players like Babar, Williamson, Root, and all of that. So, how do you address that? As in, how do you balance your team? How do you get the likes of Fakhar, the likes of Babar? How do you balance it?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think it is exactly that, having a balance of players. You can't all have Bubbers or Kane Williamsons. You can't all have Fuckers. You have to look at your side and go, well, okay, we can't all have what I'd call sort of bankers. Players that you can rely on to score runs every day. You can't have a whole team of those, because then you only end up getting 220. But you also can't have a whole team of Baz McCullums. Because so it's a matter of trying to find a balance and putting those players in the right roles. And I think we saw an example last night of the fact Fakhar Zaman was injured. He dropped out. What was done is they just slid everybody up one. Now that's fine, but Saud Shakil is still trying to find his feet, isn't he? In that role at 3, he's probably more a 4 or 5. Taib Tahir has at least opened the batting quite a lot in domestic cricket. Would make a huge amount of sense. And he's not a Fakhar Zaman, but he's an attacking player. So at least he's got the option of complementing Babar at the top, which was the idea, I guess, with going with Fakhar and Babar initially. So then all of a sudden you're putting 2 players at the top who are trying to find their feet, and it just doesn't make any sense. So it's about putting the right people in the right place.
Yeah, and
So,
on the Tayyab Tahir thing, and you said, maybe Babar needs someone at the other end to increase the scoring rate. So now that Fakhar is out of the squad, Mike Carter has also, I'll take some questions from the chat as well. He's mentioned that Imam's now replacing Fakhar Zaman. Where do you think that will change Pakistan's strategy, and what should Pakistan do now?
Well, I just hope that they learnt from that first game in terms of, look, they actually can't be conservative. If they want to get back into this tournament, you've got to take the game on. Playing against India in Dubai, sure, the games might not be 320, 330 like we saw in Karachi. We'll see in Rawalpindi. We could well see in Lahore. It might be more of a 270, 280 game. But you've got to take India on. From a Pakistan point of view, you can't go out there and have Babar batting at one end at a tempo that's lower than the modern game, and then put someone or pair him with someone who doesn't take the game on. So for me, I'd almost go with the squad they have. You've almost got to go Usman Khan and go or Taib Tahir and then bring Usman in, but actually have players that are going to actually take the game on. I guess the other way of looking at that is, India are going to have two left-arm spinners, so maybe having a left-hander, could be useful. They've got Rizwan. They're pretty much packed with right-handers right through that order. So, Imam, I guess if Imam comes in, he's actually got to know what his role is. You go back before, and when we talk about the role, your role is actually to take the pressure off Bubba, or to at least go at a tempo higher than what we saw in that first match.
Yeah, it's a very interesting way of thinking about it. Tayyip Tahir does open a lot in domestic cricket. Recently he hasn't, but over his career he has, and is that type of a player. There's a question from Rafe. I think he's very angry with the match yesterday. And Rafe says, "Can we please be honest now and acknowledge that Babar failed to evolve in his career? He may have skill, but mentally he's a weak player." So on that, Mike, you worked with Kane Williamson, and he's a player who's developed a lot of shots over the years. Like I was checking some of his data against spin, and the development of the sweep shot is insanely good. He's probably the best player of the sweep shot in the world in terms of low risk. So
Yep.
how is Power different? How do you think he's not developed his game as much?
Well, I think Bubba chooses to play at a level that's well below any level of risk. To put it at that level. So it's like I know I'm going to be I need to be a high volume player for my team. Is kind of the way he puts himself there. So I'm going to play. Let's pick a number. I'm going to not go above 70% risk level, which the one day game just doesn't allow anymore. So I think of Kane Williamson. You don't have to, like Bubba doesn't have to all of a sudden start running down a wicket and slog sweeping everything or whatever. He's actually got an amazing bat face. He can come down, he can hit the ball over cover with ease. We saw that cover drive through, along the ground, exquisite shot in the power play, and everyone goes, wow, that's great. But he can actually do that off a good length as well. He doesn't have to wait for a long half volley. He can get in line with the ball, he can pick the ball up over the leg side without any risk. Like these are all just good shots that we know he plays all the time. But he just doesn't want to push himself. And I think he'll never find out how good he is because he's already a wonderful player. But yesterday was a poor innings. And I think hopefully he'll acknowledge that.
Yeah, I think that's an important bit that as cricketers, I've seen them go back in the dressing room and be honest with themselves. That's where they improve. Mike, Jerry Edits has a question, and there's been a lot of debate in Pakistan about Babar opening. Do you think he should be opening? Do you think that he should be batting at 3? What's your take on that?
Well, I think in the current squad that's picked, they don't have a choice. And I think that's the thing. Once the squad was picked, there was no option. Bubba had to open. As I said, your spare batter is Usman Khan, who's bats at 4 in domestic list A cricket. We know he bats at 3 in T20s and so forth, but he's a player who doesn't really like it short and quick either at the start. For me, Bubba's more than capable of opening, and in fact, it's probably the best position for him in one-day cricket now because of the tempo he plays. I mean, if he comes in later when the field's spread, it will become worse because he's actually got a great opportunity in that power play to get himself to 30 at the end of the power play without any issues at all. And it's not like he's getting nicked out. Like if Bubba, your best player, is getting nicked out against the new ball, then for me you would question the value of him opening. He's not. He's actually getting himself set. He's just not able to capitalise. So there's nothing wrong with him opening in my view.
Yeah, and another very interesting comment, and there's been a lot of debate in Pakistan since last night about it, is should Fakhar have come into bat at number 4 because he couldn't run? You think Pakistan might have slotted him lower down the order? Or was it just, to set in their ways, just promoting one guy up the order, 20 minutes up, okay, let's send in Fakhar. You think there was a lack of flexibility, or do you think sending in Fakhar at 4 was the right choice?
Well, I think by the time Fakhar came in, the game was slipping away hugely from Pakistan. So it wasn't a matter of, you could use Fakhar at the end to finish the game. Fakhar actually had to do something to get Pakistan back into the game because they were so far behind it. 22 off 10 overs and 66 off 20 overs when you're chasing 321 is, you're a long way behind the game. So I guess they've identified, they've said, look, Fakhar has to come out, and even if he gets a quick 30 or 40, it might actually kickstart Babar as well and get Pakistan back almost to parity. I guess there was probably some uncertainty around how well he could run. I guess they probably hoped that he could do a little bit more than what he did. But that would be my take on it. They couldn't really wait. I mean, Salman Agha, to be fair, came out and did his very best as well. He just needed to do it for another 10 overs, and Pakistan would have been back in parity.
But Mike, here's the thing. So and this is a question that I had and I've had in the past as well, and you and I have discussed it in the dressing room as well. Usually, modern day cricket tells you that the guy who's set is the one who takes the attack to the bowling, allows the new guy to get set in, and then the new guy, after he's faced 15, 20 balls in one day cricket, then can go after the bowling. Whereas in Pakistan, there's this trend that if one guy has a role of playing through the innings, then the new batter has to do that. On a pitch like Karachi yesterday, how difficult was it for new batters coming in?
I think against spin, it was difficult. It was difficult to get some momentum, and they actually had to take some risk. I think about Salman Agha, Kushtil. Although Kushtil's innings was probably at a point where the game was already gone, unfortunately. It was difficult, but it certainly wasn't impossible. I mean, you could see that one over. The ball spun past the outside edge of Salman Agha's bat, but after that, he played Satner beautifully. Slog swept him, laid him off when he gave him a little bit more pace. He was able to score all around the ground, and they weren't exactly high risk. They were just really good shot selection. So, it's tough, but gone are the days of having someone bat through the innings for 100 off 150 balls. That's just 130 balls. That means that the blokes at the other end have got to get 220 off 150 balls. And they've got to all start. So to think that that's realistic is just not the way of the modern game. I mean, and also there was a point made before about that Babar didn't hit a boundary between over 16 and 32. Now there's actually one extra fielder in the ring now than the old days, so it's actually far easier to hit boundaries post power play. So you've just got to look for it. And sometimes, as I said, you've got to move across the crease. You've got to try and create angles. You've got to do something to allow you to get yourself moving and get into the game.
So this question I handpicked because it's Pakistan needs the strategy of Islamabad United's template of attack. Mike, last season as well, Islamabad doesn't put as much value on their wickets, on the protection of wickets, but that's T20 formats. So do you think that can work in one-day international cricket as well?
Well, yes, I do, but I don't think anyone's asking any of the players in the Pakistan team to play shots that they don't already play. Yeah. I think that's the same as Islamabad in T20. We don't ask anybody to play shots they can't play. Yes. But we pick them because they're very good at certain things, and we back them to do that. And if they get out playing that way, no problem. But if someone gets out playing a shot they've never practiced and it's not in their game plan, that's different. And you apply that to one-day cricket. No one's asking any of those batsmen, the top six, to do anything extraordinary at all. No one's asking them to start reverse sweeping if it's not in their game plan. No one's asking them to, slog the ball out of the park second ball. We're just saying, just stretch yourself a little bit and actually have that mindset that I'm actually going to look to score. I'm going to try and take the bowlers on, take them off their length, and you do it your way. Saud Shakir will do it differently. He's more of a back foot player, likes to cut. He's got a different strength. He's got to take the bowlers on his way, as does Babar, as does Rizwan, etc. So I don't think it's a matter of. It's just a matter of pushing yourself a little bit harder than we did. And it just goes back to that. I think that fear of failure that we discussed earlier on, Rayhan.
And Mike, this is a very interesting question from one of the members of Sporting Myths. He is my boss. His name is Ahmed Tariq. Ahmed Tariq has sent a message that he's surprised that Mohammad Haris wasn't in consideration. And this is an interesting question because I was looking at some of Pakistan's past tournament performances. And in 2009, when Pakistan, did not start too well in the T20 World Cup, they promoted Shahid Afridi to number three. And then in the 2017 Champions Trophy, they did not start off with Fakhar Zaman, and suddenly Fakhar Zaman was in the team, and Pakistan ended up going on a run. You think that this Pakistan could have taken that approach out of the box? You have any thoughts on Mohammad Haris?
Yeah, I do. I think he's a really nice player. You know, I watched him closely in the PSL last year. He didn't have one of his better years, but leading up to that year, he was explosive, and he is a player that takes the new ball on, and I think that that's an interesting why they've gone Imam Al Hackett, heading into this, because similar type of player to Babar, as I said, in terms of the tempo they play. Whereas at least with Mohammad Haris that he's going to take the new ball on, and if he gets through the power play, he'll be 40 or 50. He could be, and that will set the rest of your batting order up. And I think Pakistan need one of those players at the top of the order, especially if Babar's going to open. Like you can't have one without the other, in my view, and that's why it's a good point. Someone like Mohammad Haris, you know, he's used to playing the new ball. He's used to taking the new ball on. He scoops. He does it his way. And I think if he's in touch, then he certainly should have been considered. That's for sure.
Mike, there's a question from Annie Malik, and it's firstly it's about why was Fakhar sent in at four. So Annie, that question was answered earlier in the show. You can go back and check that out. And the other thing is, and this is a sentiment that a lot of fans in Pakistan have, is why is Babar to blame for Pakistan's loss? I think you've touched on that really well, and I think I would like you to elaborate on that. That the likes of Williamson, the likes of Root, the likes of Babar, the likes of Kohli, and I'm not comparing any one of them, but you think that sometimes when the team loses, why do they get blamed? Is it because they've set standards for themselves, or what's the reason behind it?
Oh, I think it is a bit of an easy target, and I think Babar is what I'd say is polarizing, because so many people love Babar and so many people love to hate Babar, and that tends to be the case with all of those great players, because it's a little bit of a tall poppy syndrome in many ways. Sort of we pump you up just so that we can kick you down, when we need to. But I don't think anyone's necessarily blaming Babar, but I think people are saying, what was that? Like, what were you actually trying to do? And
yeah.
Sure, you talked about Saud Shakil got out. He got 6 off 19, and he was struggling as well. And Rizwan struggled, didn't get underway. But I think it's more the intent during that whole period. And I think Saud, didn't get underway. Rizwan didn't. Babar batted long enough to know that he had to start to increase the tempo and take the pressure off others. And I think that's the frustrating thing, is that when you have that opportunity to do that and you're in, you actually have to grab it. You actually have to give your team a chance to win the game. And I think that was the disappointing thing. I don't think it's blaming fault. I think it's just recognizing facts.
Yeah, and one question here from Fahad Ahmed about Babar's footwork and why doesn't he play the sweep. Fahad, Mike answered that question extensively earlier in the show. We will touch upon that as we move forward. So, guys, anyone who's watching this, do subscribe to Mike Hessen's channel. It's linked in our description. And we'll be doing cross-platform shows throughout the Champions Trophy. Hopefully, if Pakistan doesn't win, then my second favorite team, New Zealand, wins the tournament. I think New Zealand is everyone's second favorite team, but they never end up winning tournaments. We'll get into that as well. There's a very interesting question from Mike Carter, and it's related to the squad. He's saying he's watching the India-Bangladesh pitch and the ball is staying low, spinners are coming into play. Pakistan have gone in with only one specialist spinner, and I think there was a lot of discussion before the start of the Champions Trophy as well. Mike, you think Pakistan got it completely wrong in picking the squad?
Oh, look, what I do think, and I'll give you a little bit of a backstory. I'm a big fan of Shadab Khan, and I've worked with Shadab for a period of time. But if he's not in the top 15 cricketers, white ball cricketers in Pakistan, I should go and do something else. Like he is easily in the top 15 white ball cricketers in Pakistan, and he could turn the game with bat and ball. Has he bowled brilliantly over the last 12 to 18 months? At times he hasn't. But we know that when he gets it right, and he's bowling nicely at the moment, and he has for the last little period of time, his batting is explosive. He is the all-round package that any team in the world would jump at. So for Pakistan to not have him in that squad of 15 astounds me, to be brutally honest. And he's been there, he's done it before, you know. So I guess I think you need a wrist spinner. And I know Abra's, a mystery spinner, and against players that haven't faced him before, he can be a bit of a mystery. I think those that have faced him before, not so much. But he's a nice bowler, but he needs help. And Salman Ali Agha, and has bowled nicely when conditions suit, and I think in Dubai they will suit. Kushal, I think yesterday had an opportunity when the ball started to turn to dominate that game, and I think that would be the frustrating thing. If you're picking, if you had a frontline left arm spinner in those conditions, in the daytime, you wouldn't go for 30 in 10 overs. The way that ball was turned, the dry surface started to spit. So without doubt, the fact they don't have another frontline spinner in the squad of 15 is a mistake. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And to not have someone like Shadab Khan, a wrist spinner, as an option in the squad, they have to be able to bat as well, just based on the fact that all Pakistan seamers are sort of bat lower down, and Abrar does as well. So they have to be able to be multi-skilled. And that's why, for me, Shadab Khan is a huge miss for Pakistan this tournament.
Yeah, I'd rather not comment on that because, I rate him as much as you do, that. So we move on to the next question, and this is a really interesting question from Furqan Ali. And Mike, you and I have discussed this off the record as well about Glenn Phillips. I think yesterday on commentary, they also discussed how he was diagnosed with ADHD. Can you shed some light on Glenn Phillips' past? How he learned new things, and what kind of a person.
Yeah, I mean, I picked Glenn Phillips for New Zealand when I think he was 20, maybe 21. He was opening the batting for Auckland and keeping wickets. I picked him against South Africa in a T20 series, and we picked him because he's an immense talent, but he's one of those guys that at that stage and age of his life, he was trying all sorts of different things. So it was hard to get him to actually focus on one thing. So I remember we turned up one time, and he wanted to focus on archery. He wanted to be an Olympic archer. So he was there every day, like 9 hours a day, whatever it was, shooting arrows, trying to become brilliant. And then the next time I came across it, 6 months later or whatever, he wanted to be a pilot. So then all of a sudden he's, training to be a pilot, do all sorts of things. And the story continues. Like, this is, it just, he couldn't really focus on one thing. I remember saying to him, I said, mate, why don't you just become really good at cricket? Like, you can do all that other stuff later once you've retired, but you're already playing for your national team. He was a keeper, but he wanted to bowl off spin because he wanted to be in the game more, wanted to field. Then he wanted to sort of become a middle order player. So even though he's relatively young, he's evolved his game. And then he started to really focus on things that were going to drive his game forward, like obviously becoming a power hitter. And I don't think Simon Dool mentioned in commentary where he did 800 press-ups a day. And that's actually true. Like, that's, a lot of that was started in lockdown, where he was in lockdown and it was like, no, I'm gonna work on my game. And if you've got a spare couple of minutes, go and look at Glenn Phillips' Instagram, and most of the time he's got his top off. You'll see that because he is absolutely built like a tank, and you can tell how athletic he is running between the wickets. In the field, we obviously saw an example of the catch of Rizwan yesterday. He is an absolute machine, but he puts the work in.
Yeah.
And that is the difference, in many of the Pakistani team at the moment, is that athleticism in the field. And you can see it even between the wickets that it's certainly a difference.
Mike, so in my time of covering cricket, being live on the field as manager and all these years, I have never seen anyone run faster than Glenn Phillips. So
Mm.
when he's taking a two, one guy has only completed one run, he's already completed two runs. It's just unbelievable. And I think on
Yeah.
TV we see how good he is, but in live it's just, it's like this guy could have been a sprinter. Uh, just
Yeah.
unbelievable to watch.
Well, you see him at deep mid wicket, and the ball's hit to deep square leg, and most fielders would just sort of jog over, pick it up, throw it back in.
Yeah.
He just goes full noise. So you're right. If you can watch him in the ground and see him run from deep mid wicket to deep square, those big boundaries, he is lightning. And there's no surprise that the strength and conditioning coach of the Black Caps is an Olympic sprinter, and
Yeah.
he loves Chris Donaldson. He's a good friend of mine and one that I've worked with, got him into the Black Caps. But yeah, he was an Olympic semi-finalist in the 100 and the 200 meters, and for a New Zealand athlete, that's unheard of. And he obviously has got hold of Glenn Phillips, and he's got some pretty good genes to work with there, and he's certainly added. Well, he's added already to some pretty impressive speed, that's for sure.
So, Mike, this is a very interesting point because I've talked extensively about this, that multiple sport countries who play and athletes who play multiple sports are generally better fielders, athletically better. And Pakistan's problem is that we only have cricket in this country. And you've seen around the world that different sports have taken ideas from different sports. For example, England's football team took some things from basketball. Then Argentina's team that won the '78 World Cup took some things from Pakistan's hockey team. But in Pakistan, only cricket, and that's baseball's power hitting has come into play as well into cricket. And do you think that that affects Pakistan adversely?
Look, I think it does. I think there needs to be a bit of a mind shift. Like, if you are going to focus solely on cricket because there are no other options, and that's what you do, then I think earlier on in the years, players have got to be exposed to things like power and speed. Not just skill, because the way the game has evolved, if you don't have speed and power, then you fall behind the rest of the pack, and you can't just do it once they reach the national side. Pull them away for a camp or do a power hitting thing or whatever. Like, those things are just, they're sort of Father Christmas visits. You're not actually going to get any traction from it. You actually need to get the next group of players that are still young enough to actually be able to transform their body, so that they can be those power and speed athletes. And that's where I think you've got to do your work. Do it at your under 17s, under 16s. So then by the time they get to under 19, they're actually genuine athletes, and as I said, have genuine speed and power as well as cricket skill.
Absolutely. And it's impossible to have Mike Hesson on a podcast or sit with Mike Hesson and not get a question about RCB. So, Mike, your take on Rajat as the new RCB captain?
Oh, look, I was delighted when Rajat got named. I mean, I was lucky enough to scout Rajat in 2021. He was playing for Pradesh, uh, and scouted him pretty extensively, and we decided we were going to pick him at the auction, and we got him at base price. And then the next year we got him as a replacement player. Didn't play from that first year. Got him as a replacement player, and then from that moment on, the world sort of saw how good he was, and he's such a quiet, sort of unassuming young man. Um, a lot of players coming into the IPL are quite loud and verbose, and whereas he is just goes about his work, very quiet, unassuming, but reads the game really well. And I'm delighted that they picked him as captain rather than just pick someone from the auction that could do the job, because I think Rajat could be a long-term prospect. He's still got plenty of years left in him, and I had a couple of exchanges with him, and he's looking forward to that challenge and looking forward to just being himself. And I'm sure plenty of those other senior players, including Virat and the overseas and co, will help him along the way.
Absolutely. So Rafe has a question about Salman Ali Agha's progress and Islamabad United picking him and making him a permanent T20 franchise side. So before he played for Islamabad United last season, Salman Ali Agha did not feature regularly in T20 cricket. Mike, I remember the conversation we had, but I'd like you to share how he was picked into a squad, the role that was identified for him. I think people deserve to know.
Yeah, look, I think in any T20 side, we talked about Islamabad United before, being a side that takes the game on. And but as I said, we need players that do it different ways. So I think, when you look at Salman Agha, he was doing very well in one-day cricket.
Yeah,
So he showed that he had a technique to be able to do that. If you look, and he at times once he got in, he was quite expensive. So
yeah,
you saw even in Test cricket, you saw hundreds that he scored in Test cricket. I saw one that he got against New Zealand, where he played all around the wicket. So I guess you identify there that the player has a certain skill set. And then if you look at the stats for his T20 record, there's nothing there that would excite you. So you kind of go, well, look, that doesn't really marry up. And I think, yourself, Shadab, have said, hey, have a look at this guy because, we think he's a good player. And obviously I'd seen him quite a bit, but it was a matter of going, well, hey, how would he fit within our side? And as I said, you can't have all players playing the same. And we needed a player who had a really sound technique, could score all around the ground playing, I would say, relatively low-risk cricket shots, but have enough power. And then you watched him play domestic cricket that year in T20, and he played beautifully. He really did play beautifully. So I was, we were hopeful, weren't we, that we would get him in that silver ranking in the draft, but we sort of thought that others would have noticed him as well.
yeah,
Because he's that good a player, I believe, that surely you can disregard the stats because those stats are old. Like they're when he's finding his feet. That's from a player. That's from a completely different player.
yeah.
And for Salman Agha to change those stats will take years.
Yes.
Because so it's like, we want context to those stats. So for me, you're looking at talent. You're looking at the role that he plays for Islamabad. The fact that you know him well. Shadab knows him well. I've seen him do well at certain times. So it was sort of a combination of a discussion, and then it was like, we can justify this decision. And
Yeah,
I do remember after we picked him. Sorry, last thing,
yeah,
because I do remember after we picked him,
yeah.
people going, what are you doing? Are you picking him to play one-day cricket or whatever? I can't remember the comment, but it wasn't complimentary towards the selection. That's for sure.
Yeah, I remember that. And interesting, funny story. So the first time that we had a role meeting, so Mike Hesson has a call with every player discussing their role. So we had a call with Salman Agha to discuss his role for Islamabad United. And he thought it was an audio call and he picked it up. It was actually a video call.
He was topless, wasn't it? Yeah.
He wasn't wearing a shirt and suddenly he's like, oh! So that was So, Shadab Khan 7, not the real Shadab Khan, has asked us why we did not pick Alex Hales. Shadab Khan 7, we discussed Islamabad United in another podcast and we'll go through our picks. But right now we're concentrating on the Pakistan team and the Champions Trophy. So, yeah, we'll take it from there. Mike, so basically, this is one of my favorite questions appearing on your screen right now. New Zealand continued to lathe him after three ducks and got results. That's what we've seen so many batters over the years. And Pakistan had developed Abdullah Shafiq into an opening batter. He was doing pretty well. And then he went to South Africa, went through that bad patch, and we dropped him for conditions in Pakistan.
Yeah.
Why do you think Pakistan does that? And how can you ever develop a player like that?
Well, no, you can't, because then the next time you pick him, he's going to be more fearful, more worried about, if I fail, this is my last game. So all of a sudden, you've created a group of players that are all playing for themselves. And how can you get a team to function like that? And I think the selection, have to take a lot of responsibility for that. And to be brutally honest, New Zealand did the same thing 15 years ago. Where I think New Zealand had something like 15 opening partnerships across sort of a season and a half in Test cricket. And it became the same thing, is that you'd be judged after every game. Have you scored runs? Yes, no. Someone scored runs domestically, get them in, swap them out. for me, that is horrible selection. Like, if you've spent the time deciding that you're going to pick somebody, you must stick with them because you've seen something that made you pick them in the first place. Otherwise, you've mucked it up. You shouldn't have picked him in the first place. But if you're going to pick someone like Tom Latham, I remember doing a radio interview after the third duck, and them saying, should we bring Conway to the middle order and keep wickets? And I said, don't be so stupid. Like, if you want to do well in this tournament, Tom Latham has shown that he's a good player of spin over such a long period of time. You have to trust him. It's just a matter of time. I think the next game was the final of the Tri-Series. He got 50 and then went on to get 100. Now that's not, it's not good luck. It's actually the fact that you're backing the right players.
Yeah.
And you're right. Shafiq is a fine player who got found out, no problems. But he's also, the reason you pick him is that hopefully he becomes a good problem solver as well. Yeah. And that he will work out, come back to familiar conditions that you've talked about. He knows his game. Then you give him a run. Otherwise, don't pick him in the first place.
Yeah, and Mike, you and I have had a lot of discussion on Abdullah Shafiq, and we've discussed if he's available, would we look at him for Islamabad? And, he is that sort of a player that you can develop into even a stroke maker. And we've seen that there is evidence of that. But unfortunately, Pakistan still has this selection type of thing. And Furqan has another really good question. It feels like New Zealand are visiting Pakistan every other day. I think they've played more matches in Pakistan than Pakistan have played in Pakistan in the last 2 years. You think that's a huge advantage for New Zealand?
Yes, I do. But I would say, New Zealand also have to travel to Dubai as well. And New Zealand, obviously in the recent Tri-Series didn't play at Rawalpindi. And we know, that Rawalpindi in January, February is a road, and they haven't played on those, those surfaces for a while. So, but yeah, it is definitely an advantage. You do become familiar with conditions, and I guess for Pakistan being the home nation, having to play at 3 different venues, one of them outside of your country is similar to New Zealand. So, I think both of them have an advantage, but not probably as great as the home nation would like.
Fair enough. Nafe Noor has an interesting question because we've extensively talked about Pakistan's batting approach. Where do you think Pakistan are going wrong with the bowling? You think leaking runs? So, Mike, we've had this discussion, and I've always thought it's a paradox where I've heard a lot of cricketers talk about if you take wickets, you can stop the runs, and sometimes I feel if you stop the runs, you can take the wickets. So, where do you stand on that argument?
Well, there are certain conditions, and we saw when the Pakistan bowling lineup bowled in Australia and they bowled in South Africa, that there were conditions that actually allow you as a seam bowling attack to go in and try and take genuine wickets. And, Shaheen Shah-Afridi, Naseem, Harris, Ralph are very good at that. There's a huge difference between that and what we saw yesterday in Karachi, where, it's a bone dry surface, it's low bounce, the ball swung for 9 balls. There's no seam movement at all. Like it's a completely different battlefield. So therefore, you have to find a different way to take wickets, and it's not a matter of 3 slips in a gully and being aggressive. I mean, I thought Naseem's spell against Daryl Mitchell was exceptional because it wasn't like he was going to get it flying through here, but because the slow nature of the surface, bowling short and being aggressive was actually quite hard to take the pull shot on. And ultimately, we saw Daryl Mitchell get out doing that. So, I think they did that for one short period of time. Shaheen came back and bowled round the wicket and tried to attack the stumps. That was a good little burst as well. But I also think, it's all about, you got to bowl changes of pace and do things like that. And I think there's a little bit of same about those 3 seamers in those conditions. In Australia and New Zealand and South Africa and England, those 3 seamers roll them out and they'll be beautiful. But I think to to think that those three seamers are all going to be effective on surfaces like we saw yesterday is unfair, and I think it's unreasonable, to be honest. You chuck another frontline spinner in there, and you have a seamer who has big changes of pace, and you've got a better, well-rounded attack, I think, for those conditions.
Yeah, and Mike, this is another interesting question, and I will take the first part of it because I've worked with so many of you New Zealanders. And the question
Yeah.
is why do New Zealand players have nerves of steel? How are they calm in such tense situations? And why do Pakistanis lack that? So, the first part of this question is that I always see myself as one of the calmest people in the dressing room, and I don't react to a lot. And then I met Mike Heston and I met Luke Ronchi. And so these guys, if you require 12 of the last two balls, the player hits two sixes, these guys will still be the same. And these guys, if we lose the match, they're still the same. And I remember I looked at Mike and I'm like, how is he so calm? And then Shadab comes into my ear and he goes, he's calmer than you. And I said, yeah, this is the first time I'm seeing this happen. So that's one thing that I've seen with a lot of New Zealanders. By the way, not all New Zealand players and coaches are calm. You should see the old Colin Munro. You've only seen the new Colin Munro, the old Colin
Yeah.
Munro. So yeah, for all of them. But Mike, Nerves of Steel, I'll give a counter to you on this, and you answer it. Despite all the
Yeah,
Nerves of Steel, despite reaching semi-finals, you guys haven't won a trophy.
correct. Yeah, correct. And that's,
Yeah,
I guess that's, well, I mean, we won the World Test Championship. So,
yeah,
we have thankfully won
yeah,
we have won a Champions Trophy as well.
yeah,
But we haven't won a One Day World Cup yet. And that's,
yeah,
or a T20 World Cup. We've made finals in both. We've made two
yeah,
finals in both. So, but what I would say is that, and it kind of goes back to the fact that when you're quite a close knit unit, then your focus goes away from yourself and is only focused on what does the team need from me at this time, and that can remove all of the clutter,
yeah,
because so if you're in the batting, so if you're Tom Latham coming out to bat, he's not thinking I've got three ducks 2 games ago and I might get dropped and we're three for whatever. He's thinking, geez, I
yeah,
need to build a partnership here and I need to try and build a platform so my team can go on and try and attack the last 10 overs. That's his sole focus. And I
yeah,
think that you can only do that when you're really settled and you know your role in the team and you know that you're part of the bigger collective. Whereas, if you feel like there's too much pressure from external pressure, or you feel like you're playing for your place, or you don't think the coach backs you, or whatever it is, all of those things can make you get really tense because you're all of a sudden you start thinking about just yourself. And I think once you do that, you can't be calm, because you've got so much stuff going on. So I think it's probably a product of the environment we've been able to create in the last sort of 10 years or so.
yeah. And also for people who are listening into this, just a fun fact: New Zealand's population is less than that of Islamabad in Pakistan, so there's less pressure. Cricket is not the number one sport in New Zealand, so I don't think there's as much pressure on them as there would be on New Zealand's rugby team, for example.
Yep.
So I think the rugby team would have way more questions on them. I think that plays a part in it as well. And a lot of times, Pakistan, India, they talk about how Australia are so crunch in big moments. So I remember Australia won the 2023 World Cup. They went back to the airport and there was no one there to to take pictures with them or to pick them up. Whereas had that happened in Pakistan or India, people would have completely gone crazy. So I think that's
Yep.
another reason why that happens. Another question from Fahad Ahmed. Um, you know, should Pakistan, with the replacement of Fakhar, I think Imam's now the replacement, but it's an interesting question. In place of Fakhar, could Pakistan have added another specialist spinner to the squad? Is that an option that you might have considered if you were in charge?
Well, the thing is, then you'd actually have no frontline openers. So at the moment, you've only got one in the squad anyway, and he's a makeshift one. And you can also only replace one player. So there was talk about there of potentially bringing in Niazi as well, but um, you obviously only got one replacement, and I think that what we've seen in Dubai even today, and what you expect to see there. The wicket is going to turn. Um, but I think the mistake of the squad was made far early. They dug themselves a hole, and now when you're only replacing, you can't actually reshape the whole squad. So, um, they've gone for a frontline opener. And as we talked about a bit earlier, I just hope that he doesn't feel like he's playing for a spot either, and can at least bring some tempo to the game.
Yeah, and Mike, there's this question that I keep hearing, and I have an argument for it, but I think coming from you would be a different thing. So, why do Pakistan's top domestic players not perform at international level? I think for me personally, my answer to this question is that when they come to international levels, they are always playing for their sport. They're never told that this is a run that you're going to get in the team. So, when you play for your sport, there's fear of failure, and then there's a conveyor belt of players left behind you, and there's always talk of selection. Whereas in a country like New Zealand, if you're picked in the 15, you know for the next year, 2 years, you're going to be backed by your management. Like, do you agree with that, or do you think there's a lack of ability in Pakistan?
There's definitely not a lack of ability. Firstly, I agree with that. I'd also add to it. I think the players are picked too soon. So I think players are picked before they've actually worked out their own game. They might
Yeah.
have had some success domestically, but I look at someone like Hyder Ali, and I guess I've had some connection with him in recent times. But he was picked very young. He was batted in pretty much every role possible, and then he had a run of failures. He's dropped, and I think he might have only been 22 or 23 at that time when he's dropped. So by that time, he's already been discarded. He was even left out of the PSL for a period of time. So all of a
Yeah.
sudden, you've got this hugely talented player that you've already said, oh, he's not good enough. He can't. He's no good at the international level. Whereas, that's a player that you might not have picked so soon, or you might have drip fed. You might have given them some opportunities to then go back and learn. And then by the time you decide to actually pick them properly, you know that they are a player that they're going to play for a period of time.
Yeah.
And I think when you find a talent like that, and there are so many examples of that in Pakistan, where they're put on a scrap heap way too soon because they're picked too early. That they could go on a tough tour that they've never even played in those conditions before. They fail, and then all of a sudden, bang, the next person who scored in domestic cricket. So I think there has to be a far better selection path of identifying players that have the skill set to be successful at international cricket, and then you have to give them a chance to be successful. At the moment, I think there's a huge chance of giving them a failure rather than actually giving them a good chance to be successful.
So, Mike, on that, the examples. Recently, I was doing a video on Travis Head, and I found
Yep.
out that he made a debut a long time ago. And you see a lot of Australian players who make their debut, and 4 or 5 years later, they become better players. And I think in
Correct.
Pakistan, you once labeled at the age of 22, if you label someone as not good enough for international cricket, there's no room for them to come back. So,
Yep.
Travis Head almost has two careers. You look at his first part of his career and the second part of his career.
Yeah.
Right now, I think he's the biggest match winner in the world.
You think Matthew Hayden? Matthew
Yeah.
Hayden came in and played, however many, very few tests, and then basically was discarded for 4 or 5 years, whatever it was. Came back and then dominated for 7 or 8 years. I think someone like, and I think someone like Hyder Ali has his best cricket ahead of him. But
Yeah.
so many people have already decided that he's not good enough. Now that would never happen in other places. It would be like, okay, well, we know he's talented. He's had some failures. Let him work it out. And then once he's ready to go again, we know he's got the technique in the game to be successful. Let him start to show his form again. Once he's got it, get him in. But it's all about timing, and it's certainly not about discarding people once they fail at international cricket. Everyone has failed at international cricket, even the
Yeah.
very best in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. And Unknown Edits has a question regarding blaming Babar. I think you need to start earlier in the episode. Just scroll back and you'll find the answer. We've answered this question. Thank you for sending in your questions. And basically, we're getting so many more questions. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. I think there's a lot of interest in you joining the show and answering technical questions. So, Shahir has a question, which is that domestic players build careers around batting pitches against 120, 135 kph here. There isn't anything in the pitches, only little for bowlers on international level. Their technique gets exposed. Shahir, just the first part of that question, that's a huge misconception in Pakistan's Qaeda Azam Trophy. Other than the season before this one and the season before that, for 2 years we had batting pitches. Other than that, we normally have bowling pitches, and we've used Grays balls a lot. We've used Duke's ball this year. So the scoring has been very low in Kazim Trophy. In terms of white ball cricket, yes, the scores are higher. But Mike, whenever there are high scoring rounds, you produce better bowlers, in my opinion. Because Australia produces fast bowlers. New Zealand has very batting friendly pitches over, not as much as they used to swing. England have gone from bowling friendly pitches to batting friendly pitches. So I think batting friendly pitches actually produces better bowlers, no?
Well, it actually produces better cricketers, to be honest.
Yeah,
I mean, because I think back, 20 years ago when New Zealand had a lot of guys that bowled 125, 130 around that, and they got away with it in first class cricket because the loads of grass, the ball seamed everywhere, and the top five highest wicket takers in first class cricket were all medium pacers, and you knew that as soon as they went to play on flat surfaces in international cricket, they would get exposed, and they did. But they
yeah,
kept getting picked because they did well domestically, and then they go over and get smashed. And New Zealand had a period of 10 years where they did that, and then we were like, well, this is not working. Like, we're not actually finding out who the best batters are anyway, because they're getting nicked out to a guy bowling 115 kilometres an hour.
yeah,
And so you're not producing batters or bowlers. So I would far prefer flat surfaces. You do like pace and bounce. You can still have pace and
yeah,
bounce. They can still be flat. And then you can start to find out who the better players are, and they start to rise to the top. But there's plenty of quick bowlers in Pakistan at the moment domestically.
yeah,
But carrying on from your point, Rayhan, I think, give them good surfaces, give them a ball, or give them something that gives them, a bit of assistance.
yeah,
But give the batters a flat surface to work on with as well, and then you find out who's got the best technique,
yeah.
and who can actually stand up. And but yeah, I'm not all for having pitches that nip around. I mean, you don't actually find out about anybody with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Pakistan, I think there was a period in Pakistan where, 4-day matches would finish in 2 days. And then there was a change to Kukubura balls a couple of 3 years ago, I think. And then we had high scoring matches. And now we are back to using Duke's ball, and matches in the Kaizen Trophy are finishing much earlier, the 4-day cricket. Fardeen Ali has an interesting insight, and I think that's a general sentiment in Pakistan as well. Whenever we talk about Shadab Khan selection, they mention that in the last 20 games he hasn't performed as well for Pakistan. So Mike has addressed that earlier. Mike, with players like Shadab and those players, those type of players, you think they should be given a longer, extended rope, or do you think 20 games is enough of a sample size?
Look, I think that players that have done well for you in the past need to be given more time. And look, 20 games is a lot. Don't get me wrong, but I think when you've got a generational talent like Shadab, who basically will be sought after all around the world, and when he gets it right, he's exceptional with bat, ball, and in the field. So those multi-skilled cricketers are hard to find. Now, without doubt, also bowling leg spin. You think of even the great Shane Warne. Leg spin is hard, and a lot of leg spinners do go through a period of time where they do lose their action a little bit, they lose their confidence, and they have to go away and find it again. I mean, that's quite a normal progression. But what you don't want to do with those players who have that incredible talent is go, oh yeah, no, now they're gone, because they're actually able to come back again. And I think if you watch, Shadab bowl, even in that Shaheen's match against Afghanistan, you go back and watch that, and you'll see the amount of revs on the ball, the fact the ball's ragging off the surface, it's curving in the air. That's a talent that you can't just go to the local supermarket and buy. That those multi-skilled cricketers are very hard to find. But without doubt, you have to keep a track of them. You don't just throw them away and think they're gone.
Yeah.
Pick the right time, make sure they're confident, and then bring them back at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are some other players in Pakistan as well who can be developed into that. Mike, you've seen a bit of Arafat Minhas as well. There's a question regarding him. There's Mehran Mumtaz. So there are guys that are coming to the system. But leading into the Champions Trophy, I think Pakistan, the one guy that they did keep with them was Sufyan Mukim, and then suddenly Sufyan Mukim was not in the squad. So, the continuity is a huge problem for Pakistan. Mike, there's a question for you regarding, from Abdullah Ajmal. He's saying, respect you, Mike. Who do you play for Pakistan if you were Pakistan's head coach as Champions Trophy openers and a hitter at number six? Your spin bowling all rounder and full time spinner.
Yeah, I mean, I like Sufyan. The problem with him is that your three seamers and a bra all bat 8, 9, 10, 11. So
Yeah,
I think that, once again, you've got to make a decision in terms of your balance. If you're going to play two frontline spinners and they both bat 10 and 11, you can really only play two frontline seamers.
yeah,
But that's fine, because if you're going to play two frontline spinners, you don't need three frontline seamers anyway,
yeah,
because you've got Salman Ali Agha there. You just reconstruct your side and go, look, we're actually on these surfaces, we need to attack in a different way.
yeah,
And as I said, if the tournament was played somewhere else, those three seamers you'd roll out and you'd only need one spinner. But in these situations, in these conditions, in Pakistan this time of year, you need different forms of attack.
yeah,
So that's the way I would look to do that. I mean, even someone like Fahim Ashraf, that type of player, I think is a nice option. To have if you have him as your third seamer because you've already got two frontline spinners and you've got Salman Ali Agha, you can
yeah,
kind of make that work. You know, um, you know, Ahmad Jamal, I think, is once again pace on, and I think that if you've already playing two pace on bowlers, you need someone else who gives you those pace off options, and that's why someone like Fahim suits.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, I mean, Niazi's another one, isn't he? Where um, he was picked, after a great PSL, and then played some games, had a little bit of success, not great, and now he's discarded. Um,
yeah,
you know, once again, the finisher role is incredibly difficult,
yeah,
and I'll put even not my Islamabad United hat. I would put Hyder Ali, and I know he's got a broken finger or whatever. I would have had him batting at six in this tournament because he's got a technique that will stand up, and he can put the hammer down in terms of power against genuine pace. So you need someone who can bat at the death against genuine pace, and he's a very good player of spin. So for me, those are sort of the attributes that you're looking for someone to bat at six as well.
Mike, so thank you so much. We try to wind this up, but this is a very interesting question, and I'd take the first part of it and leave the second part to you. So the question from us is talking about coaches. Who is Pakistan's best batting coach? Why aren't ex-Pakistan players coaching our players? They are sitting on TV giving analysis, I guess. Asad, number one, you could only have a limited number of coaching staff, so you will have cricketers earning their bread and butter on TV. I think there is nothing wrong in that. Number two, who is Pakistan's batting coach? I think we have Shahid Aslam right now. He's been with the team for a while. Number three, ex-Pakistan players not coaching our players. Asad, from my personal experience, it's not necessary that a great player will be a great coach. In fact, across different sports, people who were not successful players have actually gone on to become very successful coaches. You look at football, you look at like someone like a Sir Alex Ferguson, Jose Mourinho, so many other examples. So those are two totally separate disciplines. If you're a great player, you generally, I've seen great players cannot translate how they play to other players. I've seen great players. Mike, you've seen that as well. You ask someone like a Brian Lara to teach you a cover drive, he's going to say this without explaining how that works.
Yeah, and I've got quite a good example of that. And Sir Richard Hadley, those that are a little bit older, he's the greatest bowler New Zealand's had,
Yeah,
and he was superb. And he was my idol growing up, and I was lucky enough to work with Sir Richard quite a bit. He was a manager. I was coach, as I was New Zealand A coach many years ago. And Tim Southey was struggling to get his release coming out for his outswinger. And he came over and, paddles, they call it, Sir Richard, and can you can you look and show me how to bowl an outswinger? And he said, give me the ball. So he grabbed
Yeah.
the ball, and he was 50 or whatever at the time, ran in,
Yeah.
bowled a beautiful outswinger.
Yeah.
Came back, handed the ball back to Tim, and said, there you go, that's what you do. And walked away. And unfortunately, Tim is obviously no better off than he was before, other than he now knows Sir Richard can bowl an outswinger at 50.
Yeah.
But that's what so many, ex-players that are brilliant, they're very good at knowing what they did, and they can tell you what they did, but passing that skill on is the art of coaching.
Yeah.
And so many of the greatest players, it's just not their thing. Like they just don't have that ability to pass on knowledge. They could be great to sit down and talk to from a tactical point of view or something like that. And there'll be some of those players that will be, but generally, most of your great players, they were just very good. They didn't actually know how, or certainly how to pass that knowledge on.
Yeah, Mike, I'll try to wind this up, but yeah, so many great players from the past. I've had the same thing. I remember I was doing my coaching courses, not that I'd ever want to coach, because it's too tough. You guys, I don't know how you guys do it. But there's a vast difference in the things that you learn academically and what players are saying. I think sometimes great players do not understand limitations of mere mortals. That's what I've seen.
Yeah.
Rafe is saying he's sub to your channel. Guys, Mike has some great insights on his channel. If you want any technical information on cricket, do join his channel. We'll be doing collaborative posts throughout the Champions Trophy and moving forward as well. Mike will be appearing on Sporting Myths. I'll be joining Mike on his channel as well. So stay tuned. We'll be discussing Pakistan cricket, India cricket, obviously New Zealand cricket. Mike, thank you so much for taking time out and joining us here. Hopefully we can
My pleasure.
do this again very soon. And finally, Mike, predict your fourth semi-finals and then we'll wind up.
Okay. Look, obviously, I've got the game on the background here. So India have got a bit of a head start. Pakistan have got a bit of work to do. So look, I think New Zealand and India will progress. I think South Africa and England will progress. I don't think Australia are the formidable side that we've seen in the last 8 editions of different world events. Their bowling attack certainly doesn't look the same. So I think they'll miss out, and I think England have got too much strength to continue to play as poorly as they have over the last month or so.
Yeah.
So that'll be my 4. I actually would love to see Pakistan put up a real fight. Being the host nation, it would be a shame if they went out without firing shots. So hopefully, we see a heck of a game in a couple of days' time.
Yeah, Mike, I just hope you said Australia are not the same team. I hope Australia don't do well in this Champions Trophy. I am sick and tired of watching them win and win and win. I think we all are. I think even they are. Usman Khwaja the other day tweeted, put up a post on Insta, and I commented under it as well. Please let someone win something. So we're tired of watching you win Australia. I love some of their players, but I'd say to their face, please, it's time you let cricket go.
Cheer it around a bit.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.